Welcome to our late morning look at what's going around, what's on people's minds, what they're talking about. And if it's Halloween time, then usually about this time, we get closer to Halloween, the issue of candy safety comes up, as well as children's safety. You know, make sure that they dress in bright costumes, reflectors, lights, nothing dark so you can see them on the streets as they go from house to house. We thought it might be interesting to look into some of the history, some of the backstory, the origin of the whole candy scare aspect of Halloween. The first thing, if you're my age or even older, that comes to mind is the infamous razor blades in the apple or the needles in the candy and that sort of thing that seemed to really ramp up in the 70s and early 80s, basically lining perfectly with my childhood, because I remember the whole candy safety issue and dumping it all out, going through it piece by piece to make sure nothing was, messed with or nefarious. But as far back as 1964, a Long Island woman was accused of handing out poison to trick-or-treaters in what she thought was a joke. Helen Feel, 47, allegedly handed out ant buttons containing arsenic steel wool pads and dog biscuits. Her husband told reporters that his wife had given the items to children she deemed to be too old for trick-or-treating. It was meant as a joke, no malicious intent. I don't know how that could be a joke, but then 10 years later, in 74, an 8-year-old in Houston died after reportedly consuming arsenic via a pixie stick. The investigation determined that he was given that poison by his own father. The pixie stick had been messed with. He was allowed one piece of candy before bed. He chose the pixie stick that his dad had replaced a portion of the sugar with arsenic. Ronald OBryan was found guilty on a charge of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. It was later discovered that he had taken out an insurance policy, and this was his way of profiting from the death of his own son. So then some interesting things. We could skip right to 1982 and the Tylenol poisonings that were never solved, but there's also some stuff going on in the background. First, you have the Tate LoBianco murders involving Charles Manson and his crew in, 69? So this specter of evil hiding in plain sight, that there are evil people with malicious intent out there in the world that would do something evil, nasty, murderous. Then you have the Hell's Angel thing going on, and then Satanists and all that, and your after-school specials in the 70s about don't do drugs and child abductions and all that kind of stuff. Key, and I remember this well, being the age that I am. Key, not just the Tylenol scare of 1982, but Adam Walsh, the first milk carton kid, you might say, going missing and then later found to have been murdered. And then the Atlanta child killings. I mean, there were things going on in the culture that sort of snowballed into the consciousness. There was a 1982 or 83 Jack Lemmon movie called Missing. I believe Sissy Spacek was the mom and he was the dad, and their son went missing. So there was a lot going on in the culture writ large that caused. Remember, in the 70s, we were riding in the back of station wagons without seat belts. We were going out and playing until dark unsupervised. Helicopter parenting as a term had not been invented yet. But that all changed in the late 70s and early 80s, especially, I think, with Adam Walsh going missing.
Dave and I were talking a few minutes ago,
Brian.
and he brought up the satanic panic, the so-called satanic panic of the 1980s, where people were, worried about Satan worshipers and child killers.
Lacing things with PCP, also known as angel dust. I mean, there was a lot, there was a lot going on with all of that that led to this culture that we live in now, where it's bulldozer parenting, it's helicopter parenting, it's, that takes a village to raise a child, and oh my God, there might be poison in the candy. We are pretty freaked out as a society right now because the culture that we live in. But to get back to 82, 7 people were killed after someone laced Tylenol capsules with potassium cyanide. The perpetrator was never caught, and the story broke on October 1st. So then they didn't have tamper-proof packaging until this happened. So all of a sudden, parents are like, well, it happened. I remember this. People were freaked out. They were like, oh, that could happen to Tylenol. What could happen to candy? So that year, parents were encouraged to hand out small amounts of money or small toys or something that couldn't be tampered with. And I distinctly remember getting back to my house with my trick-or-treat bag and being disappointed with the amount of just junky little trinkets of toys and pennies and quarters, and just the selection was not that great because everybody was freaked. I was 11. No, I had just turned 12, so it was probably my final year of trick-or-treating.
Wow.
So parents have long expressed concerns over tales of poison candy or treats. Like I said at the top, razor blades, needles, that sort of thing. A lot of the incidents where something like that did happen, it was later found out to be a prank or a hoax. It wasn't some Satanist or Charles Manson acolyte, doing this to purposely maim or harm children. In 1968, the state legislature in New Jersey passed a law mandating prison terms with anyone caught tampering with apples. On Halloween of that year, 13 apples with razor blades inside were found in 5 counties, but upon investigating the reported cases, officials found that they were hoaxes devised by kids or their parents. The only incident of a child being injured by tainted candy handed out at random occurred in 2000. James Joseph Smith of Minneapolis was charged with 1 count of adulterating a substance with intent to cause death, harm, or illness. He put needles in the candy bars and handed them out. One child was pricked by a needle when he bit into the candy bar. He was not seriously hurt. No other injuries were reported in connection to James Joseph Smith of Minneapolis. So then there were drugs in candy, Brian.
Yeah, that's what all the concern seems to be about these days.
In 2000, marijuana disguised as Snickers bars unwittingly given out to several trick-or-treaters in Hercules, California, according to police. The drugs were handed out by a postal worker who obtained them from an undeliverable package. So it was later determined that it was an attempt to ship 5 ounces of marijuana through the mail. Police were convinced that the worker had made an honest mistake and he was not charged. Then last year, a 5-year-old in Ohio had a seizure after returning home from trick-or-treating and was rushed to the hospital where he tested positive for meth. Well, lo and behold, the authorities searched his dad's apartment, Cambrai Carwell, and they found meth in the apartment. He was charged with tampering with evidence and drug possession. There have been no reported cases of someone intentionally handing out drugs or drugged candy to random children as something deadly, nefarious, targeted on Halloween. Despite this, police departments across the country continue to warn parents about the dangers of drug-laced edibles. Earlier this month, the Johnstown Police Department in Pennsylvania urged parents to be ever vigilant about their kids' candy after they found THC containing edibles during a drug bust. They wanted to draw extra attention to Nerds Rope edibles, concerned that they might be intended for trick-or-treaters. Asked by Rolling Stone whether there was any evidence that the candy was intended to be distributed to kids, the police captain said there was absolutely no evidence.
So there you go.
So thanks to producer Brian, a little trip down memory lane. My daughter is 8.5. She'll be going out trick-or-treating, and routinely every year I go through her candy piece by piece, looking for anything suspicious.
Yeah, this isn't to say that you shouldn't be concerned.
Well, better safe than sorry.
Yeah, of course. Just that the idea of an evil person out in the world intending
who's
harm,
putting razor blades in apples.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any evidence to back up that urban legend.
All right, so we will keep the live stream going here for a few minutes so you all can go down memory lane and chat to each other and post and whatnot. And we will be back later this week with another edition of What's Going On Around the Water Cooler.